Welcome to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. I am your host, Molly Southgate, and today I'm interviewing
Divya Jagasundaram.
Hi there. Can you tell me about your books?
Yeah, so first of all, Molly, thank you for having me here. And
thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. The books that I have been part of, so I got into writing more as a co-author. And so the first one that I was part of was called 20 Beautiful Women. And that was, I think now, I can't remember, about maybe 6 years ago, followed by, and I just wrote a chapter about my own sort of personal journey of moving from my banking career into then my coaching career and going from sort of employee mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset and what those struggles look like, what I sort of went through. But it's kind of very motivational and geared towards, that sort of self-help and individuals that are going through a bit of soul seeking and trying to kind of figure out aspects of their life. A few years on from there, as I started looking more and more into this profession of coaching and teaching within an international coaching school and getting into getting more exposure really to other coaches and aspiring coaches who I was teaching to become professional coaches and taking them through the certification program, a question that would always come up was, like, Divya, what books are there that we could read about coaching? And whilst there were some amazing books that you could find from very, very successful coaches and people who'd been in the industry for many, many years and who would be talking about strategies and their success and so on and so forth, I saw that there was nothing out there for aspiring coaches who were fairly new in the industry, coaches who were looking for sort of tips, coaches who, again, people who knew that they wanted to do something different with their lives, but didn't really know what that would look like or how to get started, especially within the industry of coaching. So a former student, former client, turned good friend of mine and I were one day at the end of one of her sessions with me, I kind of said, what do you think about us? We both said, what do you think about putting a book out there for coaches? So that kind of led us into really taking this whole experience of co-authored books to this other level of actually, well, let's put something out for coaches by coaches and let's hear from a multitude of voices. So we then came out with Coach Wisdom Volume 1. We decided we'd put a series out. So Coach Wisdom Volume 1 was the start of this a couple of years ago. Within 4 days, in multiple countries, we hit bestseller in multiple categories across the board. And we then decided, so we had featured in that book, Coach Wisdom Volume 1, we featured 20 other authors or 20 other coaches who had stories to tell. So in that regard, Molly, it was really about, again, them sharing their journeys, sharing their struggles, because I figured as well, only hearing about success with not the failures, not the struggles is not what most new coaches want to actually read about. They want to actually hear about the struggles. They want to hear about how people have moved through things like that. So Coach Wisdom Volume 1, a complete hit. Like I said, totally surprised us because we weren't sure how it was going to be taken to, what the reaction would be. We also started to notice in that time that it wasn't only being picked up by coaches, it was and aspiring coaches, it was being picked up by seasoned coaches, people looking to embark upon a personal development journey for themselves, as well as people who were not coaches, but they were expected to coach within their job roles. And so then the following year, we came out with Coach Wisdom Volume 2. And again, same thing, within 4 days, multiple countries, multiple categories, it hit bestseller.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was, you're on such a high when something like that happens. Because again, this was an idea that really had been born from nowhere. and sometimes you have an idea and it's like, oh, okay, what's really going to happen with it? Is it going to work? How are people going to take to it? What I had done in this process was I had inadvertently gotten in touch with one of the world's best coaches, right? Marshall Goldsmith, who is one of the originals in the industry. And I had gotten in touch with him purely by chance because of something else that had gone wrong with
Oh.
a post, right? With a post that he'd not gone wrong, but he had posted something on International Women's Day. And he on LinkedIn, and his new book had just come out, and it's called How Women Write. And he had put this post up saying the first 50 people to like this post and share it will get a signed copy of, this new book of mine. And I was literally the first person to like this post and share it on his whole LinkedIn feed. And yet when I then got this email saying, congratulations, you're one of the 50, please send us your address so we can send you a signed copy. When I sent that out, I got a message back from someone on his admin team saying that actually it couldn't be done because I'm in Canada, and the little terms and conditions said that you needed to be in the US. And so I wrote back and I'm like, no, I'll pay for the postage and packaging, but can I please still have the book? Marshall then himself wrote back to me, to my surprise, and said, don't worry about it, Divya. I'd be more than happy to actually send this to you. And whilst I had him there is when I took this opportunity to share with him this idea of coach wisdom. And I asked him, well, what do you think? And also if you feel inclined to do so, and if you have any words of wisdom to share, I would love to feature you. And Molly, within 48 hours, he sent me an entire chapter to be featured in the book.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. So to get then words of wisdom from somebody who has been in the industry for like more than 35 years and who is one of the leading names in the industry, to come onto a book where really he knew nothing about me, but again, 48 hours, sent me an entire chapter, and then jumped on board with me to come on to Coach Wisdom Volume 2. And then again, which like I said, also hit a bestseller. And now we've got Coach Wisdom Volume 3 coming out later this year. So that's part of our series. The other big name that actually came on board and was just an ultimate surprise for everything we were doing here was John Mattone. So a lot of people, when I mentioned Marshall Goldsmith, John Mattone, they're like, oh, okay, that's great. Don't know who that is. But if I say Steve Jobs and I tell you, do you know who Steve Jobs is? Everybody's like, oh yeah, 100%. We know who Steve Jobs is. Well, John Mattone was the last coach that Steve Jobs worked with before he passed away. And so I had pitched the same idea to John Mattone, and he did the same thing. He also contributed his, words of wisdom. So a chapter in Coach Wisdom Volume 1, Coach Wisdom Volume 2, he actually wrote the foreword for me. And Volume 3, like I said, is coming out this year. But what happened with all of this was I thought, what about I actually put something out now that has been more of a passion project for me? And that is the AMMA'S cookbook. Which honestly was, when I say it was a passion project, it was something that I'd had in mind, of really something I wanted to do to honor my mum, number one, but also all of the other mothers and women out there who have taken time to, provide memories for their families and their children through cooking, right? If you think about family, right? You think about fond memories of your childhood, right? A lot of the time that'll go back to, or you think about your parents, you think about your own upbringing, a lot of that will go back to your childhood and what you ate and food or something, right? If you ask anybody, even what is the best food that you've ever had or what is your favorite meal? For so many people, they'll go back to, again, something that they've had from their parents. So that's where this idea came from. My mom is an amazing, amazing cook, coming from a South Asian family as well. There's a lot of, life is just very food centric. My parents we're sort of like, I'm a quarter Chinese. I'm half Indian, like half South Indian, Tamilian Indian, and a quarter Sri Lankan Tamil, right? So between those like different parts of the world, and you can imagine there's lots of different flavors of food that sort of happens there. So growing up with parents from like Malaysia, but with an Indian heritage or Tamil sort of heritage, and then growing up in England, we had like an array and a real sort of variety of foods that were available to us as we grew up. And so my mom never wanted to just sort of stick to one particular type of cooking either. She was always like introducing different flavors, always, doing her own thing with food, and everyone would just know her and recognize her because of her food and her willingness to cook for others and give, and forever keep giving. So that's where this idea of AMMA'S cookbook came up. And I started realizing that for myself, like when I got into motherhood, just the excitement of even my kids on their faces when I would cook stuff. And I figured, there is something really special about this. And nowadays, I think with women getting a lot busier, wearing the hats of moms and wives and whatever else, and work and managers and leaders. And, we have so many more aspirations than just being necessarily, in your house and looking after your kids. And no disrespect to anyone that chooses to do that. But if you are in a role where you wear sort of multiple hats, right, and you're doing different things like I am, you don't necessarily have the time also to spend on cooking laborious meals and putting all of this love and time and energy into what that meal is going to look like. So I started also trying to manage both of these things by, okay, what can I cook that's going to taste good, that's going to be good for my children, but also be quick so that I can get on and I can do everything else that I also want to do for life and work and everything else. And so I started finding like these and making up like shortcuts to recipes because I needed to go faster. And so, yeah, that's what my last published book has been about. It's AMMA'S cookbook, and it's a real variation of different types of cuisine, but also a lot of just made up stuff, but stuff that has been, part of even other people's households because they've come here, they've tried it, and they've been like, what's the recipe for that? What was that? How did you do that? How do you cook so quickly? And AMMA'S cookbook actually hit bestseller before it was even published. So my publisher had this idea of, let's do like a pre-launch, and it hit bestseller and everything before it was officially published, which was amazing. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. So I hadn't had that experience before. And again, that was super duper scary from my perspective because, I had 3 other books out that I had been attached to or that I had co-created between 20 Beautiful Women and then the 2 volumes of Coach Wisdom that had all hit bestseller. And so for me, this was the first thing that I was kind of putting out on my own. I'm not going to lie, it was scary because I'm thinking, how is this going to be received? And I'll tell you, Molly, like to this date, it absolutely astonishes me. I still get I get messages from Amazon saying, when you get the report. So seeing that people in like Japan or Switzerland or Australia or New Zealand have bought this, and I'm like, how did they find it? Like, what are they doing with it? So that's really, really quite a cool experience to have been through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's also incredible. Congratulations on all of the bestseller stuff. That's amazing. Yeah, I actually made a recipe from this cookbook tonight. I made the lemon pepper shrimp stir fry, and it was absolutely fantastic.
Cool.
But
you didn't tell me that before. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. I just made it, and it was delicious. But I totally what you mean. Like you're saying, like you try to make things that it can be so quick because so many recipes, like at least I know this always happens with me with cookbooks where I'll buy them and then I'll be so excited and want to make everything. And then I have time to make maybe one soup.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's so true. Yeah.
And so this was really nice going through it, going, oh, look, I actually can cook some of these sometime because I can have time to, and it can open me up to new flavors that I might not have tried before.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for trying something out.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for this. Yeah, I loved getting to try it. Can you tell me a little bit more about the background behind this book, though? And like, I know that as I was reading like the foreword and stuff, how you had your mom write that. I loved that. Can you tell me a bit about the process of getting her to do that?
Yeah, so I remember a couple of years ago when so they live in England, and I remember calling her and I just said, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm actually dedicating it to you. And I remember her being really sort of taken back and sort of also wondering, like, how is all of this going to work? Like, are you really going to put something out there? And I know she was even more surprised when I said to her, I really I want you to write the forward, because again, so Amma in Tamil means mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and that's why I called it this, because it was dedicated to, like I said, it was mums, not just my mum, but even the other women in my life that have been, role models, who have been the sort of maternal type, figureheads that I've looked up to, as well as just the fact that I wanted to honor women, at large. And so when I asked her to write this, I wanted more of a background to her as to what this actually means, what cooking means, and the fact that she's done so much. I mean, she's raised my brother, my sister, and myself, and the other aspects that a lot of people don't know, or maybe a lot of people do know already, because I talk about it quite openly, is that we've grown up with a temple in our back garden. So my parents live on the outskirts of Oxford, in a little village called Middleton Stony on the outskirts of Bicester. And on about an acre and a half of land, they've built a temple, which is about 38 years old now. And it's one of the only private Hindu temples in the country. But there, my mom cooks and feeds for everyone that comes. And sometimes, there were times when I was growing up where there'd be like, 50, 60 people a week, 100 people, that she would be cooking and serving. And so that was why I had, really wanted her. There was nobody else for me, Molly, that could have written the forward. For me, it felt like this is a testament to all of the work that she has been doing and tirelessly doing for many, many years, even to this day, through COVID. And we were all getting so mad with her, especially when COVID first started. We were, we wanted them to stay in. And every week she was on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, through lockdowns and everything, was going and cooking for the homeless and donating her time, giving her energy, and just going to shelters and cooking for people. So that's all that's what she's known for. And that was on top of being a mom, a wife, a grandmother, a researcher for Oxford University, like so many things that she's doing. And yet this was still something that she would not compromise on, right? Compromising on the quality of the food that she actually cooks and that she serves. So yeah, for me, there was no better person in the world that could have written the foreword for this.
Oh, that's so amazing. Yeah, I remember as I was reading it, I loved that because it made it feel even more special.
Yeah.
Because like it's like a lot of the stuff in it, like when you're talking about like in your introduction and everything like that, like I could really feel like you talking about your mom a lot and all that. It felt so perfect that she was the one to write the foreword.
And it was interesting because when I was trying to think about, even photographs and what to sort of put in, like you'll notice when you go through the book, it's quite different, right? It is very family focused. It's about the roots. It's about actually, not having the perfect looking kitchen, not having the best appliances, not having this picture perfect kitchen that, actually for so many of us doesn't exist. Yet, that was some of the things that some of my friends I remember were saying, like, oh, but are you going to renovate your kitchen? Are you going to go and rent a kitchen? Are you going to go rent a house and then use that kitchen space for your photo shoot? And I was like, nope. I want to keep it really authentic, right? I want to keep it very, very real, because that's what people are actually like day to day, right? We don't necessarily have like the best appliances or the most up-to-date appliances. And sometimes there is going to be like a breadcrumb on your counter, right? You're not going to have this like, perfect surface. And I said as well, I don't have like $100,000, $200,000 budget to like do things a certain way. This is about actually the heart. And that was one of the best pieces of feedback that I got from this, that this was all about, the book itself was about heart, and you could feel the heart and the love that had been put into this book, as well as the family ties and taking things back to sort of tradition and culture and just family history, right? And again, home cooked meals, right? So those are the other sort of special bits that I felt came through in the book. that weren't necessarily planned for, but it just happened. It just panned out that way. So I'm happy. I'm fortunate.
That is so awesome. I was actually just about to say, I could feel like the heart in the book. So when you said that, I don't know if you could see, because we're on Zoom. Anyone listening to this, we're on Zoom. And I kind of like looked surprised because I was literally about to say those words. Because you could really feel it. And especially like, I loved what you did at the end of the book too, how you had other people that were important to you contribute recipes, or you had people contribute recipes in memory of other people. And
that's right. Yeah.
That was so cool, especially also how everything related back to those people's moms.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, again, that was actually my daughter's ideas. Like, they were the ones that said that, like, why don't you, why don't you have like a special like bonus section? That would be really cool. And you could include the other special women in your life. Right. And so that's when I approached them. And there was one of my aunts who I'd approached because I wanted to get a quote, like, what is something that your mom like even taught you or used to say? And when she sort of repeated that to us, she's like, oh my God, like, it's brought back so many memories of my mom, because her mother died when she was so young. And she said, I haven't even thought about that. Like, I haven't even thought about how much I loved it when my mom used to cook that. Right. So that was what I was trying to do as well. It was to elicit some of that feeling, right, that comes about when you think back to your loved ones. And so that really came out, and had a lot of great feedback on that bonus section as well.
Yeah, it's really special. So cool. This is kind of a pivot from what we were just talking about, but has your experience in banking or life coaching or any of your other career things influenced the process of writing this book?
I wouldn't necessarily say that well, actually, first of all, I think that any of your experiences at some point in your life are going to ultimately fold into something else that, you can take all of that and use it consciously or unconsciously towards other things that you're doing, and it will influence it in some way, even if we don't necessarily realize it at the moment. Within my banking career, if I look back at this is where the speed of needing to do things actually happened, right? Because from England and I really didn't cook a lot in England because I was living with my parents, but when I came here, and my mum is still likes to control the kitchen. Now, when I go back, she's quite free with letting me use it and stuff. But back then, when I was living there as still their child, I did not, I barely cooked because my mum was taking care of it. But when I moved to Canada, and suddenly I was stepping into wife, manager, and actually one of the youngest managers in North America, and quite quickly then into being a mum. I suddenly had like all of these different roles that I was trying to manage and be good at it. My personality is to actually try and challenge myself, right, in anything that I'm doing, right? So at that point, I didn't want to be a mum, for example, right? When my eldest daughter was weaning her off and I'm trying to introduce solids, I knew that there was like jarred baby food and there was things that I could do. But my mum had said to me, if you can put the time into, making it fresh every day, then do that because it's better for her. Right. And so I did that. But it meant that, it was a challenge. It's always, it's much easier for me to just go buy ready-made stuff and do it. But then I was like, okay, now I need to get into the habit of this. And then I want to make it tasty because I started trying some of that baby jar food. And I was like, oh, this is disgusting. And if I can't eat it, how am I going to get, no wonder she's spitting it out. Like, that was literally my thinking, right?
Yeah.
Right. No wonder she's spitting it out. No wonder she doesn't like it. And so that was like the first and only time I ever tried that as like emergencies. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I will do what my mum said and I'll just make it from scratch every day. And I had a system. But then when I went back to work, so when I went back to work again into my managerial position, now I was working longer hours. I'm trying to prove to, management that they made the right decision in bringing somebody back off their mat leave early into a position. And even though I'm young, that I can handle it and I can do it all. And that's where it honestly got tricky because I have now started to raise I have a toddler is used to now eating home cooked food and various different flavors. I can't now switch her into like other stuff. And I don't want to. And yet I want to do well at work. And so I don't want to cut short hours. And so how do I manage all of this? How do I do it quickly? So if I look at from that experience, yeah, that's actually, I suppose, what has helped to shape my ability to do things faster, right? That's where early on I started actually, changing up recipes to see what I could do here. And then if I fast forward, if I go into like coaching is what's given me the confidence to do the book, right? Because I don't think I would have ever thought to do something like this before. But then because, this idea of trying different things, stepping out of your comfort zone, coaching has taught me one of, I think, the most important lessons for myself, which is to embrace my authenticity of who I am, right? And not to shy away from who I am versus who sometimes either I think I need to be or who I need to show others that I am, right? And so for a lot of people, some feedback that I got when I put the AMMA'S cookbook out was, that was really brave, right? We know you as like this corporate world person and this life coach, but you're sitting on a front cover of a book, like in your Indian attire, all like dressed up in a certain way, as if like you're from a little village somewhere, right? And so, but I suppose the coaching side, my coaching experiences, stepping into something like a profession with or into the profession of coaching has taught me entirely to embrace my own authentic self, and that each of us here have our own, personalities, our own individuality, but you've actually got to embrace that. You've got to respect yourself before you expect anyone else to respect you or to respect what it is that you're doing. And I think if I go back in hindsight, if I start to sort of break down more of my banking career, there was a lot of like, I need to prove this, I need to prove that, I need to prove that even as a young woman or a young South Asian woman, a young brown woman, a young mother who's a woman who's trying to do management and leadership, I've got to be X, Y, Z ways, right? Coaching just allowed me to just let go of all of that, really let go of all of those labels, all of that pressure that I think you tend to put on yourself. Obviously, there's different kind of pressure, but the pressure of actually showing up a certain way for the betterment of other people versus the betterment of yourself, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. Suddenly it's about how do I want to show up for me, because this is how I recognize myself, this is how I love myself, versus this is how I think I need to show up in order to be accepted, right? Yes. So it was that difference of just not shying away from who I am.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that's really so it's so inspiring to hear. That's actually one of my favorite questions when I have people on the show who've like had other career paths before writing. Because it's so interesting to hear about like how so many things can affect what happens now, and like what you were talking about, like with the confidence levels and the time and like all of that works. I just find that really fascinating, and that's awesome that you now are like at the place where you can show up as your full authentic self. And I think that really you can feel it in this book, like certain like you can feel it in certain like even cookbooks and stuff like that, where it's not quite as much of a linear narrative. There's still a narrative that's being put across. And in this one, it feels very real and very authentic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, that was about everything I have for you today. I just have one more question, and that is, what do you have coming up?
So we've got Coach Wisdom Volume 3 coming up later this year. And I was working on another book that was, again, coming out more. So this is another idea that I've had for a good number of years. And although I initially had wanted to put that out in July, I think it's going to be more so January 15th next year that I aim for that to go out. And that book is called Brown Girl in the Ring. And it's really talking about systemic racism, especially for women of minorities who are really making strides in breaking that glass ceiling. So it's a collection of different stories from women of different ethnic groups, minorities. But what have they been doing and how have they been doing it? Because I would like this book to serve as really being inspiration for other women underrepresented women, right, from various backgrounds who are sort of paving the way for other people, right?
That sounds absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
That's
one of those other ideas. That's one of those other ideas that have just been sort of sitting with me for a good few years, and it's in the works now. But like I said, the only difference is I think we're going to focus on Coach Wisdom Volume 3 for this year. But January 15th, 2023 is when you guys can expect Brown Girl in the Ring.
Amazing. Well, if you want to come back on the show anytime, talk about any upcoming books or anything like that, I would be happy to have you on, especially that Brown Girl in the Ring sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Molly. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. For Read Between the Lines, my name is Molly Southgate.
And I'm Divya Jagasundaram.
Let's end this the way all great stories end. Happily ever after, the end.
The end.
Thank you for listening to Read Between the Lines, a book podcast. You can follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Read Between the Lines Podcast and on Twitter at RBTL Podcast. Make sure to follow the authors who I've been talking to hear all about their upcoming projects, and also because they're cool people. This show is hosted by me, Molly Southgate, and produced and edited by my dad, Rob Southgate. Read Between the Lines is a Southgate Media Group production, and you can find all the great content put on by the network at southgatemediagroup.com. You can read the story of how I and many other podcasters started in the anthology book Pod Life, which you'll find at the link in the show notes. Also in the show notes are links to buy the books featured on this episode. Using those links supports this show and the incredible authors being interviewed. Have a great week and keep reading.